cruel millionaire marries a young virgin bride, but on wedding night, what happened left him stunned. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. The rain drummed softly against the tall windows of a London penthouse, turning the city lights into streaks of gold and silver. Inside, the air smelled faintly of leather and expensive cologne. Alexander Moreau stood by the grand piano, his posture straight, his expression unreadable. The storm outside seemed calmer than the one in his chest. Across from him sat Isabelle Clark, a young woman in a worn beige coat, her hands clasped tightly around her handbag. She had come expecting a job interview, not a proposal that would change her life. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears as his words sank in. "Marry me," Alexander said simply. His voice carried no warmth, only precision. "Think of it as business." Isabelle blinked, unsure she had heard correctly. "Excuse me? You need money," he continued, walking toward her. "I need a wife for 6 months, a contract. You will be compensated. When it is over, you will be free." The words hit like cold rain. Isabelle's throat tightened. Her mother was in the hospital, the bills had tripled, and her scholarship had been revoked. She had no savings, no family to turn to, and nowhere else to go. "Why me?" she whispered. Alexander paused, studying her face. "Because you have no reason to fall in love with me. That makes you perfect." Lightning flashed behind him, carving sharp light across the marble floor. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Isabelle took a breath that trembled at the edges. "You do not even know me." "I do not need to," he said. "I just need you to sign." He set a thin folder on the table. The contract gleamed under the chandelier. Every page was lined with cold precision dates, clauses, signatures. The final page bore a single green emerald ring resting in the center, glittering like a frozen tear. Isabelle stared at it. Her reflection warped inside the stone. "This is insane," she murmured. Alexander's jaw tightened. "So is the world you live in. You said your mother is at St. Mary's Hospital, correct? If you agree, her bills will be covered by tomorrow morning." Her eyes widened. "You looked into my life." "I look into everything," he replied. "That is why I never lose." A long silence stretched between them. Outside, thunder rolled over the Thames River, and the city pulsed with distant sirens. Isabelle's fingers hovered over the pen, shaking. Somewhere deep inside, her pride screamed to walk away. But then she remembered her mother's frail hand, her soft voice whispering, "Do not give up, my dear," she signed. The sound of the pen against paper was small, almost invisible, but it sealed her fate. Alexander closed the folder, slid it aside, and spoke without emotion. "Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Moreau." The rain outside grew louder, as if the heavens themselves had just witnessed a dangerous deal written in lightning and regret. The next morning, the rain had cleared, leaving the streets of London washed clean and glimmering under pale sunlight. Isabelle woke up in a suite she could hardly call her own. The bed was larger than her entire apartment, the sheets smooth as silk, the air scented with white roses that someone had placed by the window. For a long moment she lay still, unsure whether to breathe or scream. The events of last night replayed like a fever dream. The contract, the ring, the man who spoke of marriage as if it were a merger. She sat up, pressing her hands to her face. "What have I done?" she whispered. A soft knock sounded on the door. A woman in her 50s entered, dressed in a crisp gray uniform. "Good morning, Mrs. Moreau," she said politely. "I am Clara, Mr. Moreau's housekeeper. Breakfast is served downstairs." The words felt heavy, Mrs. Moreau. Isabelle wanted to protest, but the title was now legally hers. She followed Clara through wide hallways lined with art that probably cost more than her mother's entire medical bill. Every step echoed against marble floors, reminding her how far she was from home. At the dining table, Alexander was already seated. He looked immaculate in a dark suit, scrolling through emails on a tablet. He did not glance up when she entered. The morning light glinted off his watch. "You are late," he said without emotion. "I did not know there was a schedule," she replied quietly. "There is now," he answered, setting the tablet aside. "We have a public appearance this evening. The press has already been informed of our marriage. I suggest you learn quickly." She sat across from him, her stomach tight. A plate of fresh fruit and croissants sat untouched before her. "Why would you do this?" she asked finally. "You could have chosen anyone, a model, a celebrity, someone who understands your world." "Oh," Alexander's eyes lifted to hers, calm but distant. "Because I do not want a woman who understands my world," he said. "I want one who will not betray it." The air thickened. Isabelle could not tell whether he meant trust or control. After breakfast, Clara handed her a folder with a printed schedule. Language lessons, etiquette training, designer fittings. She was to meet Alexander's stylist in the afternoon. Every hour of her life had been planned without her consent. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her second-hand clothes were gone, replaced with tailored silk. Her hair fell in soft waves. Yet beneath the transformation, her eyes remained the same, haunted, uncertain. When the limousine pulled up to the private designer studio, reporters flashed cameras from the corner of the street. "Is that the new Mrs. Moreau?" someone shouted. Isabelle froze. Alexander's hand came to rest at the small of her back. His voice was low, controlled. "Smile," he said. "You belong here now." The words stung more than they soothed. She forced a smile for the cameras, the flashlights blinding, her pulse quickening. Inside the car, silence fell again. Finally, she turned to him. "You talk about belonging as if it were a cage," she said softly. He met her gaze through the reflection of the tinted window. "Sometimes," he murmured, "a cage is the only thing that keeps the wolves out." Outside, the city blurred into streaks of gray and gold. Isabelle looked down at her ring, the emerald catching the sunlight. It glittered beautifully, but all she could feel was its weight. For the first time, she understood that she had not just signed a contract. She had entered a world where love was currency, and trust was more dangerous than debt. 3 days later, the contract became real in every sense. The ceremony was held in a quiet civil courthouse on the west side of London. The air smelled faintly of rain and ink, the same scent that had followed Isabelle since the night she signed her name. There were no flowers, no guests, no music. Only Alexander, his lawyer, and the notary, who read the vows in a monotone voice. "Do you, Alexander Moreau, take Isabelle Clark to be your lawful wife?" "I do," he replied, steady and cold. When the same words were spoken to her, Isabelle hesitated for a heartbeat too long before whispering, "I do." The pen trembled in her hand as she signed the marriage certificate. It was over in less than 10 minutes. Outside, the sky hung low and gray, the drizzle returning, as if the weather itself disapproved. Alexander opened the door of a black limousine and gestured for her to enter. "From now on, appearances matter. Remember that." She nodded silently. Through the tinted glass, she watched the courthouse disappear behind them. She felt no joy, no triumph, only the hollow quiet of someone who had traded freedom for survival. When the car pulled up to the Moreau estate, Isabelle's breath caught. The mansion rose like a monument, wrapped in ivy and stone columns. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth and roses. Inside, the foyer gleamed with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Every corner whispered wealth and isolation. Alexander handed his coat to a servant and turned to her. "Welcome home, Mrs. Moreau." The words sounded polite, but there was no warmth. He led her through long hallways until they reached a grand staircase. "Your room is on the east wing. Mine is on the west. Remember the agreement." She looked up at him, uncertain. "No love, no shared room. Only 6 months," she said quietly, repeating the rules. He nodded once. "You understand perfectly." Then he left her standing there, surrounded by silence. That night, Isabelle unpacked her few belongings into a closet twice the size of her old bedroom. The emerald ring glimmered under the lamp, mocking her with every sparkle. She sat on the edge of the bed, the sheets untouched, her heart heavy. When she looked out the window, she saw Alexander outside in the garden, his figure outlined by the glow of the lanterns. He stood still, staring into the dark. For the first time, she noticed something fragile in him, a loneliness that mirrored her own. The following morning, Clara brought her breakfast and a list of events. Charity luncheons, business galas, photo sessions. Isabelle stared at the list, overwhelmed. "How does he do this every day?" she asked softly. Clara smiled faintly. "Mr. Moreau does not live, dear. He performs." Those words stayed with her as she prepared for the first official dinner as Mrs. Moreau. The gown fit perfectly, the diamonds borrowed, the smile rehearsed. When she descended the staircase, Alexander looked up from his glass of wine. For the briefest moment, surprise flickered in his eyes. "You look the part," he said. She met his gaze, her voice calm but trembling. "I will play my role, Mr. Moreau. But do not expect me to lose myself in it." His expression shifted, something unreadable passing through. "We shall see," he said, turning away. As the dinner guests arrived, flashbulbs burst outside the gates, capturing the image of a perfect couple. Yet behind the smiles and champagne, Isabelle felt the truth settling like a secret. The real test of this marriage had only just begun. The night of their first official dinner unfolded like a scene from a film that Isabelle never meant to star in. The ballroom glittered with gold chandeliers and the soft hum of a string quartet. Guests moved through the room in designer gowns and tuxedos, laughter echoing against the marble. Isabelle stood beside Alexander, her hand lightly resting on his arm, her smile flawless yet hollow. "Mr. Moreau, congratulations on your marriage," said a man with a heavy accent, shaking Alexander's hand. "Your wife is quite the surprise." "Indeed," Alexander replied coolly, sipping his wine. His eyes did not meet hers, but his grip tightened slightly, as though to remind her that they were still acting. Isabelle had been introduced to dozens of people that evening, her cheeks aching from polite smiles. She could sense the curiosity in their eyes. Who was this young woman? Where did she come from? Why her? Across the room, a tall blonde woman in a silver gown approached. Her presence drew whispers. She was Elena Voss, one of Alexander's former business partners, and, as the tabloids liked to remind everyone, his former lover. "Alexander," Elena greeted smoothly, her smile sharp. "You did not tell me you were remarrying so soon." Her gaze drifted to Isabelle. "And to someone so delicate." Alexander's tone remained calm. "Elena, this is Isabelle Moreau, my wife." Elena extended her hand. "My dear, I must say, you are braver than I expected. This world is not kind to the inexperienced." Isabelle felt heat rise in her cheeks but forced a polite smile. "Thank you for the advice," she said evenly. "Kindness has never been my weakness." For a moment, silence cut through the air. Then someone laughed nervously, and the music swelled again. Alexander looked at Isabelle with something close to surprise. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned, he found her standing on the balcony overlooking the gardens. The air was cool, scented with roses and rain. "You handled yourself well," he said quietly. "I did what was required," she answered, eyes fixed on the city lights below. He studied her for a moment. "You could have walked away," he said. "Most would have." She turned toward him, her voice steady. "I already told you, Mr. Moreau. I do not walk away from things I cannot afford to lose." A flicker of something human crossed his face, respect, perhaps, or recognition. "You are full of surprises, Mrs. Moreau." And you," she replied softly, "are full of walls." He almost smiled, but the moment passed quickly. "Tomorrow we leave for Italy. There is a charity gala in Florence. You will need a new gown." "Of course," she said, though her voice carried no emotion. When he left the balcony, Isabelle leaned against the railing, closing her eyes. Beneath the diamonds and the dress, she was still the girl who once counted coins for train fare. The following day, they flew to Italy on his private jet. From the window, the clouds rolled like an endless sea. Alexander sat across from her, reading business reports. His expression was carved from stone. Isabelle watched him for a while, then looked away, whispering to herself, "I wonder if he even knows how to feel." When they arrived in Florence, the villa that awaited them was breathtaking, with stone terraces and olive trees glistening under the sunday. Yet despite the beauty around her, Isabelle felt the same quiet ache in her chest. She had everything she was promised: security, comfort, and the illusion of belonging. But as she watched Alexander walk ahead of her through the grand entrance, she could not ignore the truth forming inside her heart. The contract had given her a new life, but it had also taken something she could not name. And though she had agreed to play her part, she was beginning to realize that pretending to be his wife might be far easier than pretending she did not care. The charity gala in Florence was held inside a glass-domed conservatory, surrounded by gardens glowing under soft golden lights. Musicians played quietly in one corner while guests in gowns and tuxedos sipped champagne and whispered behind jeweled masks. Isabelle stood beside Alexander, her emerald dress catching every flicker of light, her posture graceful, her smile measured. From the outside, they looked perfect, a picture of wealth and control. Inside, she felt like she was standing in borrowed skin. Elena Voss was there again, shimmering in silver, her laughter floating through the air like perfume. She approached them with two investors in tow. "Alexander," she said sweetly, "the press is asking for a statement from the new Mrs. Moreau. You do not mind, do you?" Before Alexander could respond, Isabelle stepped forward. "Of course not," she said, her tone calm but firm. "It would be my honor." A small crowd formed as a reporter lifted his microphone. "Mrs. Moreau," he began, "you seem very young. Many say your marriage was sudden. What do you wish people to understand about your husband?" The room quieted. Alexander watched her closely, his glass halfway to his lips. Isabelle smiled gently. "I wish people would understand that my husband is not as cruel as he pretends to be. He works hard, he builds, he protects. He may not show it, but beneath that armor, there is a heart that remembers what it means to care." The reporter looked impressed. Cameras flashed. Elena's smile tightened. Alexander lowered his glass slowly, his eyes unreadable. After the interview, he guided Isabelle away from the crowd. His voice was low. "That was bold. You spoke as if you know me." She met his gaze. "Maybe I do." He studied her for a long moment before saying quietly, "Be careful, Isabelle. People in my world devour those who speak too honestly. And yet," she said softly, "you invited me into it." Their eyes met just for a second, but something wordless passed between them, fragile and real. Later that night, a storm rolled over the Tuscan hills. Rain tapped against the windows of the villa. Isabelle could not sleep. She wandered through the dim hallway, her bare feet silent against the marble. When she reached the terrace, she saw Alexander outside, drenched in rain, looking out at the dark valley below. "You will catch a fever," she said, stepping forward with an umbrella. He did not turn. "Sometimes pain is the only thing that reminds me I am alive." "Is that why you married me?" she asked quietly. "To feel something again?" He looked at her then, rain streaking down his face. "I married you because I thought I could control everything," he said. "But lately, I am not so sure." For the first time, the distance between them began to break. She handed him the umbrella, but he did not take it. Instead, he stepped closer. His voice was low, almost a whisper. "You should go inside, Mrs. Moreau." But she did not move. "Not until you tell me what you are afraid of." He hesitated, the rain softening to a mist around them. "Losing what I never deserved," he said. Neither spoke again. The storm quieted, and they stood side by side beneath the trembling light of the terrace lamps. For the first time, silence did not feel like a wall. It felt like understanding. When Isabelle returned to her room that night, she knew something had changed. The contract still bound them, the rules still stood. But somewhere between duty and truth, a heartbeat had begun to echo soft, dangerous, and real. The next morning, the rain had stopped, leaving the villa washed in pale sunlight and the scent of wet jasmine. Isabelle woke early, restless, replaying the moment on the terrace over and over in her mind. She told herself it was nothing, just a strange night, a crack in his armor, but her heart refused to listen. When she came downstairs, Alexander was already in the courtyard, speaking with a group of donors. His voice was calm, controlled, every gesture precise. Yet when his eyes met hers across the garden, there was something different in them, a flicker of quiet recognition. "Good morning, Mrs. Moreau," he said as she approached. "Good morning," she replied softly. He turned back to the donors, finishing his discussion before excusing himself. "We have a meeting in the city," he said to her. I would like you to come. The drive to Florence was quiet, the hills rolling by like painted scenery. She watched him from the corner of her eye. For once, he did not hide behind his phone or his tablet. He simply sat there, lost in thought. Finally, she asked, "Why are we meeting investors in person? You could have sent your legal team." He looked out the window, because trust cannot always be delegated. Then, after a pause, he added, "And because I wanted you to see what this life really costs." The meeting took place in an old stone building overlooking the Arno River. Isabelle sat quietly beside him as executives debated figures and deals, their words clipped and cold. When one man questioned Alexander's judgment for marrying her, the room went silent. Alexander's expression did not change. "My personal life is not a matter for discussion," he said evenly. "If you doubt my ability, you are welcome to withdraw your investment." The man quickly backtracked, muttering an apology. Isabelle felt her pulse steady. For the first time, she saw not the cruel millionaire the world believed him to be, but a man who refused to bow to anyone. After the meeting, they walked along the river. The air smelled of coffee and rain. Street musicians played soft violin nearby. Isabelle stopped to listen, smiling faintly. "You used to play, did you not?" Alexander asked suddenly. She looked surprised. "How did you know that?" "I read your university file," he said. "You were offered a music scholarship before you switched to art." She nodded slowly. "My mother used to say that painting and music are the same, they both tell stories without words." He studied her face, something soft in his eyes. "You miss her?" "Every day," she whispered. For a moment, silence fell between them again, but it was not uncomfortable. It was gentle, like the air before a confession. That evening, back at the villa, Alexander found her sketching in the courtyard. The sound of crickets filled the night. She had drawn the view of the hills under moonlight, delicate and imperfect. "You are talented," he said quietly. She smiled without looking up. "You sound surprised." "I am," he admitted. "I have spent so long surrounded by people who only create profit. I forgot what real creation looks like." She looked up at him, her voice soft but firm. "You build empires, Alexander. But what good are they if you build them alone?" He did not answer. For a long moment, he simply stood there, watching her. Then he turned away and said, "Good night, Isabelle." But as he walked back into the house, he felt something stir in his chest, an ache he could neither name nor escape. The rules they had written were beginning to blur, and for the first time in years, Alexander Moreau realized he was afraid of his own heart. A week later, the peace they had found began to fracture. It started with a headline. A glossy magazine splashed a photo of Isabelle across its front page. The waitress wife Alexander Moreau's shocking secret. The story dripped with lies, twisting her past into something shameful. By noon, the news was everywhere. Reporters camped outside the villa gates, their cameras flashing through the wrought iron fence. Isabelle stared at the article, her hands trembling. "Who told them?" she whispered. Alexander's expression was unreadable as he tossed the magazine onto the table. "Someone who profits from humiliation," he said coldly. "Elena, most likely." Her heart sank. "Can you stop them?" He did not answer immediately. He walked to the window, his reflection merging with the storm clouds outside. The press loves a scandal more than truth. The board is already nervous. Investors fear this marriage has made me weak. She swallowed hard. "And what do you fear, Alexander?" He turned, his voice sharper now. "That you are not strong enough for this world." Alapos, the words cut deeper than he meant them to. Isabelle took a step back, blinking away the sting in her eyes. "You think I care about their money? I only ever wanted my mother to be safe." He looked at her then, something conflicted flashing across his face. "This is not about money. It is about control, about survival." But before she could respond, the phone on the table rang. He answered sharply, listened, then his jaw tightened. "They want you to step down from the charity board," he said after a pause. "They say you have embarrassed the company." She felt the floor tilt beneath her. "So that is it? You will let them decide who I am?" Alexander hesitated. "For now, it may be best if you remain out of sight until this fades." Her voice rose, trembling with hurt. "You mean hide? Like a secret? You regret?" His silence was her answer. Isabel's eyes filled with tears. You promised this would be business, but I see now it was only pride. She tore the emerald ring from her finger and set it on the table. If this was all a game to protect your image, then congratulations, Mr. Moreau. You have won. Before he could stop her, she turned and walked out into the rain. The following days were a blur. The villa felt emptier than ever. Alexander threw himself into meetings and calls, but the silence in the halls was louder than any storm. He caught himself glancing toward her empty chair at breakfast, expecting to hear her soft voice, her quiet questions. Clara, the housekeeper, finally spoke one morning. She left for Paris, she said gently. She took only her sketchbook. Alexander said nothing. He only nodded once. But that night, when he was alone in his office, he opened the drawer where the ring had been placed. It gleamed faintly in the dark, a shard of green memory. For the first time, he realized that what had begun as a contract had turned into something he could not control, and losing it felt worse than losing any empire. Outside, thunder rolled over the valley. He pressed a hand to his chest, as if trying to steady the ache inside. You were right, he whispered into the silence. A cage does not keep the wolves out. It keeps the heart in. And with that, the walls of Alexander Moreau's perfect world began to crumble. 3 weeks passed before Alexander saw her again. The world had moved on to another scandal. But for him, time had stopped the day she left. Every morning he would check the newspapers, half hoping to see her face, half afraid that he might. At night, he walked through the empty halls of the villa, haunted by the echo of her laughter and the faint scent of her perfume still lingering in the air. Then one morning, as the sun broke through the fog, his assistant rushed into the office with trembling hands. "Sir, you need to see this," she said, placing a tablet on his desk. The screen showed an article from an art magazine, The Art of Isabelle Clarke, From Poverty to Power. Beneath the title was a photo of an exhibition in Paris, and there she was, standing beside her paintings, radiant and calm, surrounded by critics and admirers. Alexander stared at the image for a long time. The gallery walls behind her glowed with color, portraits of women, faceless but full of light. In one corner, a painting caught his eye, green and gold hues swirling around a single ring resting on a table. The title beneath it read, What We Sign for Love. He exhaled slowly, realizing what he had lost. Without hesitation, he called his pilot. "Prepare the jet," he said. "We are going to Paris." When he arrived at the gallery that evening, the crowd was already thinning. The air smelled of oil, paint, and champagne. Isabelle stood by the window, speaking with a journalist. She looked stronger, more certain, but when she saw him, her expression froze. "Alexander," she said quietly, "you should not be here." "I had to come," he replied. "I saw your work." She folded her arms, defensive. "Then you know everything you need to. This is my life now." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You called it the art of Isabelle Clarke. But every piece in this room is about us." Her eyes flashed. "No, Alexander. They are about me. About learning that I did not need to be saved or owned." He looked around the room, then back at her. "I know I hurt you. I let fear dictate everything. I was terrified that if I loved you, I would lose control." "You already did," she said softly. "The moment you let them decide who I was." He nodded, his throat tight. "I was wrong. I see that now. The world can keep its headlines. I only want one truth, and that is you." She hesitated, torn between anger and the ache that had never fully healed. "Why now, Alexander? Why come here after all this time?" He reached into his coat and pulled out the emerald ring. It glimmered in his palm, catching the gallery light. "Because I could not give you back what I took from you then," he said. "But maybe I can give you what I should have offered from the beginning, freedom to choose." The room had fallen silent. Even the curator paused to watch. Alexander knelt, not as a performance, but as a man stripped of pride. "Isabelle, I am not asking you to return to the contract. I am asking if you will let me start again, honestly this time." Tears welled in her eyes, though her voice remained steady. "You think it is that simple?" "No," he whispered, "but nothing worth having ever is." For a long time, neither spoke. Then Isabelle reached out and touched the ring. "If I say yes, it is not because I need you," she said softly. "It is because I still believe you can be more than what you pretend to be." He nodded, his voice trembling. "Then let me prove it." As the lights dimmed, the city outside shimmered through the glass. The emerald between them caught the reflection of Paris at night, a promise reborn not from contract or pride, but from choice. 6 months later, Paris had slipped from spring into summer. The air was warm and sweet with lilac, and the city hummed softly under the golden light of late afternoon. In the heart of Montmartre, a small art studio had reopened its doors. Above the entrance hung a new sign, painted by hand in delicate script, "The Art of Isabelle Moreau." Inside, sunlight poured through wide windows, washing over canvases that told stories of courage, loss, and forgiveness. Isabelle moved through the room, arranging flowers in glass jars. Her emerald ring glimmered softly under the light, no longer a symbol of debt but of devotion freely chosen. Behind her, a familiar voice spoke. "You still work too hard." She turned, smiling. Alexander stood in the doorway, dressed simply for once, his usual armor of formality replaced by ease. He looked at home there, among the colors and the light. "I learned from the best," she replied. He walked closer, his hand brushing against hers as he handed her a folded newspaper. The headline read, "Moreau Foundation launches Hearts Unbound, a global initiative for artists in need." She looked up at him. "You really did it." "I had help," he said quietly. "From someone who taught me that leadership means more than control." Her smile deepened. "And love?" He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Love means showing up when it matters." They shared a quiet moment, the kind that needed no words. The man who once measured his life in contracts now found meaning in something far simpler, the woman who had chosen to stay, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Later that evening, friends and artists gathered for the opening of Isabelle's first independent exhibit. The room filled with laughter, soft music, and the gentle murmur of admiration. On one wall hung her final piece, a large canvas depicting a single open door flooded with light. Beneath it was a small plaque that read, "For those brave enough to walk through." As the guests toasted, Alexander raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said. Isabelle met his gaze, her eyes shining. "To the mistakes that lead us home." When the evening ended, they stepped outside into the quiet street. Paris glowed around them, street lamps shimmering against cobblestones, laughter drifting from a nearby cafe, the faint melody of an accordion floating through the air. Alexander slipped his arm around her shoulders as they walked. "Do you ever think about how it started?" she asked softly. He chuckled under his breath. "Every day. The cruel millionaire who thought love was a transaction. And the foolish girl who signed her name anyway," she added. He stopped, turning her toward him. "You were never foolish. You were brave enough to believe in something I had forgotten existed." She looked up at him, eyes bright in the lamplight. "And what is that?" "Grace," he whispered. "The kind that saves a man from himself." He kissed her then, slow and certain, as the bells of the old church in the distance began to ring. Around them, the city of love seemed to breathe. No contracts, no lies, no masks. Only two hearts that had found their way back through truth and time. That night, as they walked hand in hand across the bridge over the Seine River, Isabelle glanced up at the stars and thought of how far they had come from a cold penthouse in London to this quiet moment of peace. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that their story was not one of a deal signed in desperation, but of redemption earned through love. It had begun as a contract. It ended as forever.